All right, we're back here with Christine in the studios for When Monet Meets Debussy, the wonderful part of the week where we get to talk about art, artwork, and really dive deep into some interesting pieces. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm enjoying this time of the year.
Should we say Happy Chuseok already? Do you say that? It's not exactly the day yet, but it's the first day of the holiday. So Happy Chuseok.
Yeah, Happy Chuseok.
Are you excited? Do you have any plans? What's going on?
Just going to spend some time with my mother and eat some delicious food.
Ooh, anything favorites?
I don't know. Everything that she makes is my favorite, but I do really love eating rice cakes, ducks during this time of the year.
They get to pile up, actually. You know, I tend to eat a lot of those. But we're here to talk about some interesting artwork. What did you bring for us this evening?
Okay, so, we like to travel to different areas of culture, I guess. Mm-hmm. And tonight, I thought it would be the perfect night to not only talk about the idea of home, but also talk a little bit about Korean culture. So the artist for tonight works mostly with large sculptural installations that explore his complex cultural identity stemming from having a nomadic life. So having moved a lot, he not only works with more physical architectural elements of spaces that he's called home, but also their emotional significance and presence they've had in his life. When you walk into the gallery room, you're cast with a soft blue light from a sheer fabric hanging halfway up the walls and a large structure that is suspended from the center of the fabric. The structure is made of the same fabric in the likeness of a brick archway with traditional Korean giwa roofing. It seems to be a life-size construction. You can see the bricks are in the same size of real bricks, and the gate is made big enough to comfortably walk through. But there is one thing, this gate is hanging upside down. Through the gauzy fabric, all the lines of the structure are beautifully layered on top of one another. The straight parallel lines of the bricks, the symmetrical curvilinear lines of the giwa tiles, and the intricate ornamental details on the end of each corner. It has the precision of an architectural rendering, like a three-dimensional blueprint drawing. But the airiness of the sheer fabric, its soft, rippled surface reinforced with those beautiful darker lines, and also the blue light it's casting on the space in your body, make you feel like this is so much more. As you look up, you notice a reflection. Separating the upside-down structure from the ceiling above is that layer of blue fabric, above which you see the same exact structure but in a vertically mirrored image. This gateway suspended above is right side up to be walked through, but it's not in your space. You're separated from it, and it's nothing more than a sleek reflection. Only a muted image behind those ghostly layers of blue can pass through that barrier between your space and a virtual space floating above.
That was a pretty amazing description. I can almost see it right now. And you're describing something that is pretty, like a structure, but yet made out of very loose fabrics. Is that right?
That's right. So this is an installation. So it takes up the whole room, and it's called Reflection. So it's made with that blue gauzy fabric. It's nylon fabric. And there are stainless tubes, wires that are going through all the edges to hold the structure up. And it's created by a Korean artist. His name is Do-ho Seo.
Well, that is really amazing. In the sense that when you look at something like this, at first I thought it was almost like a 3D printed design. It's so intricate and detailed, but yet it's such a kind of light and movable piece. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, they're all hand-sewn in by a traditional Korean craftsmen. And it's actually a one-to-one recreation of a gate in his childhood home from the main house to his bedroom. So in some ways, it is like those, those renderings, those architectural renderings. And it's that gateway at his childhood home is in itself a reconstruction of a historically significant Yi Dynasty building. So it has two parts. One with the upside-down gate that's being viewed from the gallery level, and the other one is the right side up gate that's suspended from wires from the ceiling of the gallery, and it can be viewed from a balcony mezzanine level.
Oh, okay. So he is actually recreating something, a memory from his home, which is also a recreation of another historical gate, because it looks like it's almost meant for like a king or something very impressive. It is really, really amazing. And you mentioned the giwa tiles. Those are just the normal kind of half-rounded, little rounded tiles that you see on many traditional houses?
That's right. It's the traditional Korean roofing that you see.
So he is a Korean artist then?
Yes.
And obviously he grew up in Korea, where these gates are. But what about some more background on him?
Yeah, so he actually, I said he was a nomadic artist. He ended up immigrating to the U.S. from South Korea in the early 90s in order to study art. So he went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and then he went on to get his master's at Yale. And there he made some really powerful works about his sense of cultural identity. I think he thought a lot about culture as he was trying to fit in to the new culture there. And later on in his works, he went to focus more specifically on the ideas around home and what that means to his culture. So he said, quote, "The experience of leaving home is what made me think and become aware for the first time of the notion of home as such. It could therefore be said that home started to exist for me once I no longer had it."
So he is definitely a product of, kind of cross-cultural exposure. And at the same time, I never really thought about it, but I have a similar feeling about my own home, that you don't really appreciate until you leave it, and then it's not there anymore, something changes.
Yeah, and I think this time of the year, many people go back to their homes or, their parents' homes. And I think that makes us think a lot about that. When we're young children, very few of us think about who we are or where we belong until we are first displaced from our sense of home and family. It could be the first night you spend away from your parents or the first time you step into a classroom that you realize that you're not like everyone else around you. And that's when you start to realize that home has a meaning for you, family has a meaning for you, and cultural identity. All those ideas start when you are a little bit displaced from those things.
And it's funny that he was able to kind of do these large-scale recreations, almost trying to get back, maybe a sense of where he came from, something that he might have lost. So that's why he has dedicated. And I'm sure this isn't the only one. You mentioned earlier that he does other ones, kind of retracing his steps, as it were.
Yeah, he makes a lot of these one-to-one recreations of places he's lived in. So he also made one for his studio apartment in New York and also his studio where he works. He makes really beautiful works, but this one specifically is about his childhood home and especially the gate that leads him to his bedroom. So it's, I think, a lot more personal.
Okay.
And, he's made a big move going from, one side of the world to another. And he says his memories and his home followed him, and as he puts it, like a ghost. So this suspended form of reflection, it's really reminiscent of a house-like blob that's looming over and pursuing a figure in one of his early drawings. This drawing was titled Haunting House. It's like a play on words of haunted house.
Yeah.
So the house itself is haunting him. And on this connection, he says that it's a very ghostly house, always following or chasing me. I proactively try and bring my home with me wherever I go. That's where the idea of making a transportable house in fabric came in. But maybe it's been haunting me since the beginning.
Oh, it is. And, I can see that the transportable is very strong. But now that you mentioned this haunting idea, when you look at the piece we're talking about today, Reflection, it almost seems like I'm sure if there's even the slightest breeze or some movement, it would be almost like a ghost kind of looming over him.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of words like web-like, gossamer, like ghost-like. You know, a lot of structural homes, they're very fixed, static, and they're heavy.
Yeah.
But he's, even though he's making the same exact dimensions, he's making them very light and transportable. And like he says, he wants to be able to fold them up in a suitcase and bring it with him wherever he goes. So, he wants to travel with his home, and I think it's really interesting that he's making transportable homes, just the way you can, fold your clothing and put it in your suitcase. And it's also like kind of his meditation on his self-imposed exile and a sense of loss that he might have from it.
Well, it's funny that he has a pretty grand home. When you look at this gate, he must have kind of come from a wealthier background, or what is a little more of his family history?
Yeah, that's interesting. His home actually was built by his father, who was an influential painter. His father's name was Seok, and, it was a copy of another building that was built in the 19th century as part of Changdeokgung. Now, King Seonjo wanted to experience the life of ordinary people, and so he had a scholar's house built for this purpose in his compound, and it's considered one of the most beautiful examples of traditional Korean architecture. Now, 150 years later, Seo's father made this replica of the master's quarters and also the library from the royal home. And it was also built with high-grade lumber that's salvaged from the original complex.
Wow.
Because, unfortunately, there was a road that was built through the original complex during the Japanese occupation because they wanted to systematically try to destroy Korean culture at the time.
Oh, so it's really interesting. Not only is it very transparent, but it's almost like you're getting these layers of this one building in different representations, from his father's representation to now his own one, and that he turned it upside down definitely says a lot about what he thinks, not only about his childhood, Korea, where he grew up, but also the fact that maybe something that he longs for, that it's light and he can move around with it.
Yeah, and these ideas of, a building, trying to recreate a building and bring it back to life again and again, and in some ways preserve the culture, I think also speaks a lot. Because, buildings are not only about, the style of culture you see at the time, but it's also about a sense of home. It's about who we are. It tells us who we are. So I think this desire to recreate that is really strong in his work. And another interesting thing is because he was living in this sort of strange place for someone who grew up in the 21st century, he says that as a child, it felt like living in a time capsule. And another thing is the, ghost-like visual effects of the nylon fabric is also another part of Reflection, which is a reference to the rituals of mourning. So the nylon fabric for him was inspired by linen structures that are built inside of houses during the 3-year mourning period in Korean culture. And I think this speaks to the sense of also longing and loss that connects with ideas of home. So home is a place that you recognize when you're away from it, and a place you start to grow a strong sense of desire to recreate as an adult. And I think in some ways he's trying to memorialize this idea of home.
Well, he is doing a really wonderful job. And I'm curious, is this, I'm not sure if you know this, is this in Korea or is it in the United States? Because I'm just looking at the kind of where it's set. You did provide some pictures, and it is called Reflection because it's a huge space to put this installation in. And the fact that he has it reflected on the ceiling, it's almost like you're in an upside-down world, but it looks really, really stunning.
Yeah, and it also feels like maybe you're underwater. When you see the reflection of a water, the reflection itself is upside down.
Yeah.
It feels like you're in that space, inside the reflection.
Oh, it's very, very cool.
And I think, okay, so just to go back to your question, this actually, it's transportable, so it was shown all around the world.
Wow.
So it's something that you can bring with you.
Okay, so it does, he didn't have to reconstruct a very heavy gate, but really when you look at it, it looks like something I've never seen before. I recommend our listeners go and check it out because it's something that inspires and it's a little shocking when you see it.
It really is, yeah. And another thing that I found interesting was, he plays with two parts of architecture. So in some ways, it's really precise, right? It's a one-to-one representation. It's very, very detailed and intricate. But another way, it's all about expressing this feeling. And so there's a really famous quote by an American architect, Louise Kahn, who talks about measurable and immeasurable in architecture. And he says, the design, making of things is a measurable act. In physical nature, everything is measurable. But what is unmeasurable is the psychic spirit. The psyche is expressed by feeling and also thought, and I believe will always be unmeasurable. So, we don't really know the effects of what a building will bring to our, innate sense of physical space until it's brought to life. We know what the dimensions would be, but we don't know the feeling that you would get when you step inside that place and, you're a part of the structure or the environment.
Yeah.
And I think he really wanted to explore those ideas as well. He says that, he's also not just interested in the physical space, but the intangible, metaphorical one. So the metaphorical one would be these ideas of loss and, trying to bring something that's special to him wherever he goes, but also a psychological one, just...
Okay. He's really playing with it because he created a space that is so loosely a space. I mean, it's still definitely, but it's upside down and transparent, but it's still a space where all of these memories and impressions and metaphors can come to life. Just around some fabric. So, you said that he was very famous. Did people enjoy this, I'm assuming? He's pretty renowned for this kind of work?
Yeah, he made a lot of works similar to this one. I think the series that he makes with these fabrics are my favorite. But he also has some of his older works. He made one also during the Rodney King riots. He made a big sort of suit made of dog tags from GI soldiers.
Really? Previously on a couple of shows ago, we talked about another inspiration for an artist coming out of the Rodney King artist, Nick Cave. That's really interesting that people are making suits out of that.
Yeah, I think, people are really inspired by what was going on politically at the time. And I think that's what I love so much about his works is that he is exploring ideas of culture and his identity through these events and the world around him. And specifically this one, he talks about how he's no longer interested in building something completely new.
Yeah.
But he wants to dig up history and tell untold stories from behind the walls.
Well, I think he is doing a wonderful job at that. And again, our listeners should go check out this artist. But, thank you so much for bringing him and his work Reflections to our show. And I hope you have a wonderful Chuseok.
Thank you. You too.
All right, we'll see you back next week.